controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are a sub-science here to make things make sense.
So a lot of people talk about, are you left brain? Are you right brain? And it's like kind of been like a myth of that people have talked about in neuroscience for a long time. But today we're actually going to talk about how there's some validity to what your left and right brain do in really fascinating ways. And a lot of this research comes from people who actually have the main connector of their brain split.
Mm-hmm. Like a lot of that science is either it's been intentionally split to help with other conditions.
Usually having to do with severe epilepsy. So they have there's like a highway between both hemispheres of your brain called the corpus callosum. And so when that is split in people with severe epilepsy, they can actually do studies on them to sort of really figure out what the left part of your brain is doing, what the right part of your brain is doing. And there's a lot of really interesting things that end up showing up and how different each side of your brain actually is.
Yeah. Yeah, like there is actually some truth to the lateralization, which is just like your left brain has some tasks that it is dominant in, and the right side of your brain has other tasks that it's more dominant in. Obviously, your whole brain communicates. Like any sort of complex task you need to do or think or whatever, like everything is communicating. There's stuff going on all over the place. But like language is at a different part of the brain than like processing emotions and movement, and these things kind of like have certain parts of your brain that light up more and are more active for those things.
The corpus callosum, which is like the connection between both parts of your brain, which assuming you have unless it's been cut, is found in all mammals, but not marsupials or egg-laying monotremes like a platypus. And then I started to be like, marsupials are so weird. Yeah, and so are platypuses.
Yeah, they're extra weird.
And are they always in Australia?
Platypuses?
Or like
marsupials?
Like all the weird stuff?
Like a lot of the weird stuff is there. Yeah.
Like even when I saw the beaver the other day, I was like, okay, cool. I love it. Makes sense. But like a platypus, like imagine seeing like
basically a beaver with
like an electronic like beak. It's like so like sometimes those are like things you learn about as kids, but like I've never seen one in real life. And I always forget like, oh, they do exist.
Yeah. And well, that's something really awesome and beautiful about nature is like sometimes you can imagine like fantasize about crazy creatures that don't exist, but then you realize there are so many amazing creatures on Earth, including even things like a giraffe or a rhinoceros, like these, or a kangaroo. Like if you didn't know they were real, you'd think they were fake.
Yeah,
platypus is a good example.
Kangaroos, like marsupials.
When you see them taking their babies out of their pouches, you're just like, that is so interesting.
Or just seeing a kangaroo and being like, so you're a jacked MMA fighter? Remember when we saw them in real life and I was actually like, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
Like,
and
they're
you see
jacked.
the videos where they actually like get like buffed up and want to fight.
Wait, you're a gorilla horse? Like it's so weird. And I am like, Australia is, I mean, I know this is a podcast where I make fun of Australians, but that country really does have like the good when it comes to like insane animals.
Yeah, and aren't there like so many creatures that were in Australia that are extinct that were like the giant ones? Like there were like giant versions of kangaroos and there were like giant versions of a lot of other creatures.
But that was also in South America too.
Kangaroos?
Well, no, giant like sloths and stuff like that.
Yeah, but by giant, I mean giant.
Whoa.
I gotta look more into
that. Yeah, I'm like, are you?
Well, I would Google it right now.
Okay, one interesting thing from my trip, we're gonna get back into left brain, right brain for those listening on YouTube. We were talking about when I was in Spain. This person I met comes up to me and they're like from New Zealand, super friendly, very attractive actually, and put his arm around me. We were drinking and I was just like, well, I have a crush. And he was like, find out we're Canadian. He goes, oh, Canadians. Oh, I love you guys so much because we are the same because we both live next to oppressive countries. And he says New Zealand is the Canada, Australia is the America, you're the Canada. And I was
I've always kind of thought that.
I didn't know that. I was like, why do I have such a kinship to Lord? And now I'm like, and then it just, he said it so clearly. He was like, you get it.
We're like the baby sibling that is like next to like a much louder, more present.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was interesting.
Obviously, like many Canadians relate to Australians as well. But when you put it in that context, it makes sense.
I'd never thought of it like that.
Like, I'm sure New Zealand news and media is infiltrated by Australian stuff because it's a bigger economy, bigger structure. You know what I mean?
And they also are like, because you're smaller like us, we are like more woke. Like we have the ability to have more socialism and like, they have an incredible like relationship with their, incredible is an intense word. They have a better relationship with their indigenous population than
like Australia.
Yeah. Like things that, anyways, that I thought was so interesting. Don't know why I brought that up. Oh, Australia used to have big animals. Okay.
Okay,
So,
going back to
let's talk about the left side first. That's what I was gonna do.
So, well, the interesting thing is that like not your eyes, but the visual fields, like the things that happen in your right visual field, are processed by the left hemisphere of the brain,
And all right side of your body. Your touch.
Yeah. Well, that's like movement, so it feels like more intertwined. But I just find it so interesting that it's like, it's not like the left eye is linked with the right brain. It's like the left visual field is linked with the right brain, and the right visual field is linked with your left brain. And that comes a lot into play when we talk about the studies that have been done, which blow my mind and sometimes make me feel like, when I was reading them, and
yeah, it's crazy.
It's not making me feel ill. Like, I don't want to say this in a weird way, but it just makes you realize how you do not choose anything, and just your brain is so interesting, and you just believe you have a reality. But when you see, and we'll talk about some of these studies and what happens when they disconnect the left and right, what happens in people when they do studies on their visual field, it's just so fascinating.
Yeah, like your consciousness and everything about you is like absolutely made up. Anyways, no, it's true.
That is true.
That's why this stuff is so interesting. But okay, like it's the left visual field of your vision is controlled by the right side of your brain, the right visual field controlled by left, but also your sensory touch and perception, like physically. So all like your right hand, moving your right hand is like controlled by the left side of your brain. Like, it's just so also like, okay, LOL.
Yeah.
It's just like so funny that it's backwards.
I know.
Or flipped.
Well, that's even like, you know, how the eye actually, in the input of eye information, is actually inverted, and the brain flips it right side up.
Yeah, like
there's so many things in the brain and in the body, like cords and wire. I'm saying this, cords and wires as though we're computers, but like even the way our eye is constructed, it's like, it's not the ideal way. There's the reason we have a blind spot is because of the way it evolved over time. There's actually, like, you could call it a mistake.
It is a mistake. Like other animals, don't have blind spots.
Wires or nerves should be behind, but they actually are in front and have to like go through the eye. Something else interesting. So like language, for example, is localized to the left hemisphere, especially in right-handed individuals. And then spatial and visual processing, facial recognition, and some aspects of emotional processing are often more associated with the right hemisphere. So these are general terms. Obviously, like, speaking involves a lot of your brain and like being able to communicate. But I just think it's interesting that those parts of the brain pick up those things, and kind of like the neurons conglomerate and develop in those regions of the brain.
No, but the left side of the brain, being the dominant side of your brain because it's what controls speech and language, is actually the same for left-handed people as well.
Say that again. Oh, it's the same. No,
I just don't know.
I was laughing because Ernie's now shy. He's having this is his premiere.
Oh
day.
my God, he looks so funny. Ernie, oh my God, if you're watching on YouTube, it's actually amazing. His eyes are crazy.
Okay,
and you could tell you were not listening. Okay, so
you said it happens to people who are right-handed as well, or you said left-handed as well.
Yeah, so most humans, around 90%, are right-handed. And then, therefore, it means that the left side of your brain is the more dominant one. Because, like, essentially, if you're right-handed, you're mostly using your right hand, so your left is more dominant. And it's also, like, the language, the concept of speech and language is localized in the left side of your brain, the more, quote-unquote, dominant side of your brain. Even in people who are left-handed, you'd think that maybe it'd be flipped and their right side would be more dominant. It's not the case. 70% of people who are left-handed still have a more dominant left-sided brain.
Yes.
So I was like that was just a study I read, because a lot of people who are left-handed think like, no, I'm actually like, it's different because my brain's different, so I use my left hand more. It's like, actually, no, when it comes to language and speech processing, it's still in your left side.
Right. Okay.
And like, the left hemisphere, which also specializes in like sequence-based behaviors, is like really integral to like routine and repetitive processes. And it's also the part that's associated with executive functioning and like overcoming impulses and thinking things through. And I was like, okay, I have like a weak left side. But what they were saying was like, okay, because our ancestors like had language arise like at some point, and then it became housed in the left side of the brain. They think that because language became so important to like thinking and behavior, and essentially just like all aspects of like storytelling, like all this important information then became why your left side is more dominant.
Okay.
Because it's like it started to house language, and then language became like actually the most important thing in the world.
Most distinct thing for humans. Yeah.
Yes, and then there's all this idea of like, can you have consciousness without language? Can you have thinking without language? And you're like, okay, whoa, obviously the language and speech part of the brain is going to be like really evolved right now in humans compared to other sides.
I mean, that's so interesting. And I always think about how like we are as a species obsessed with language, and we believe we can understand everything in the world through this construct of language that we have. And I have to try to remind myself sometimes like it is as limited as humans are, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just this kind of made up way for us to communicate. And yet everything we understand and believe is processed through that format.
And also when they cut the middle part, like the left side of the brain is the part that looks for narratives, patterns, unity. And so one study, they would like this, it was confusing, but like when they have split brain people, if they showed them an image,
and then is the stuff that makes me feel sick.
Yeah, showed them a thematically similar image, the left side of the brain would eventually like panic and try and interpret it, and then it would think it saw the image already, even though it hadn't, because it's trying to like make patterns.
Right. Yeah. So this is people whose like literal right side and left side are not connected. So as Greg said earlier, what was it? The corpus callosum.
Callosum.
I
don't know. Yeah.
It's like without it, those sides can't communicate, and that's how we have a distinct or a more clear idea of what each side does. I'll use another study as an example, which is similar. So these are in people whose brains are not communicating between sides. So in these people, if a word is shown in their right visual field, they can say it out loud because they're like processing that actual word. If it's shown in their left visual field, they cannot name it, but they can draw it with their left hand.
Wow.
And so, for example, like say the word key is shown in the left visual field and ring is shown in the right visual field at the same time, the person will say ring, but they will draw a key.
Yes. Okay.
That's when I'm like, what? That is so weird. Like it would be so trippy to be, it's like your brain sides are actually functioning at the same time, thinking for you in a way. Like it brings into question, like what is consciousness? It's like another layer on top of all this, because obviously your consciousness in this case for these people would be able to process part of it, but another part of your brain that you are not consciously aware of takes on a different meaning and a task and draws something completely different.
That's crazy.
Yeah. A couple other experiments that blew my mind. So when shown a word like smile to the left visual field, the person might smile, but they have no idea why. Because they're not consciously processing it, but there's a part of their brain. So even the left side is like usually dominant for language, but the right side can still understand simple words. But it's like you wouldn't be like processing the word smile, but your body would know that's what it was saying. And then, subjects are asked to pick up objects with each hand based on what they saw in each visual field. So the left hand may pick up an object matching the image in the left visual field, even though the person cannot say what it is.
That's
so like they'll be shown that image and they can pick it up, but they don't know why.
Wow.
So that
I want my brain split for a day.
Yeah.
Because I want to be like, can you believe I did that?
It's interesting because like these participants and patients are able to live totally normal lives. Like, because you would think, how can you function if your brain is split? And obviously the brain is super adaptable. Even people who have strokes in certain parts of their brain and lose parts of like damage their neurons are able to regenerate that. Like even language and things like that can redevelop in other parts of the brain with effort and time.
Yeah.
And so the brain is like super adaptable. But it just like brings into question so many things for me when you realize like our conscious attention and the way we process things is just one part, which makes sense. It's like we don't pay attention to what our heart does. We don't pay attention to what our liver does. Like we have no conscious awareness of anything basically in our body. And yet our brain is constantly communicating to those parts of our body.
And you can kind of only focus on one thing.
Yeah.
Too.
It's like consciousness is just like, is a part of what it means to be you, but it's the part we are so connected to.
And your body is just like, well, it's a separate episode, but it's like you're essentially just like predicting what it thinks it should see.
Yeah, like whether or not you actually are seeing things versus like constructing a reality.
Like it's like essentially like what the thing you're not looking at like directly with your eyes, your brain's just like building what's around it based on what it thinks it should be. Oh my God. Okay. So the right hemisphere, it processes melodies, which is interesting because some people were kind of like, wouldn't a melody just be like a sentence? It's like, it's not, because your sentence would be processed more with your left hemisphere.
Wait, I thought you said it left. Melodies are processed in the right hemisphere. Okay.
And then also touch features a strong role in the right hemisphere. So like essentially you have better skills at touching things with your left hand.
Oh, whoa.
So in the studies, if you were asked to detect or compare shapes that are put in your hand doing just by touch, like, are these two shapes the same or not? It's done way better by your left hand.
That is so interesting, especially considering most people are right-handed. You would assume, like, I probably use my right hand for so much more that you'd think, like, I'd be able to have more sensitivity.
Yeah, that would be a fun test to do.
Yeah.
Just because, like, the results are that you're way better with your left hand. And the right hemisphere is better at spatial tasks. And the right hemisphere is better with numbers. And then this is the study I did the TikTok on that like went viral or whatever, which is that because facial recognition is more of a right hemisphere skill, and same with the recognition of emotions, there's like really striking, you can look it up online. It's fun. We're going to do a video about it too. But when they like take faces or photographs of faces or drawings of faces, and they make one side have an emotional expression and the other side neutral, and they ask you how much emotion is seen in these images. Again, the right hemisphere processes the left visual like side of things. So if the left side of the face is the one that has been changed emotionally from like happy, surprised, angry, when the left side is changed, your brain, and you look at them, you'll be like, that person's really
That's
happy.
the emotion you
That
see.
person's really angry. And then they'll do the same thing where the left side's neutral and the right side's change, and you'll be like, that person looks, you can't really tell.
Or more neutral compared to...
Yeah, or
it's like
sometimes
whatever's on the left is what
it's
you're
crazy.
actually processing more of the emotion.
And
as.
like you'll look at someone and be like, they're so angry, and then you'll look at the right side change and you'll be like, they look confused. Like,
But it's the same image, just mirror reverse.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yes. And so again, that's because the right side of your brain is better at processing emotional like images, and therefore when you see emotions on the left side of someone's faces, you're able to understand it more. That is effing crazy.
Yeah.
And
think of all the things that we just have no grasp of. Like, because all this research is so cool, and we're like, the amount of things that we'll probably discover.
Okay, so this is crazy because a lot of this is from this book. Like my favorite, maybe we should do a podcast on these studies, because I'm just going to give you a taste now and stay subscribed because you're going to get more information. But his name is Peter Godfrey Smith. He's my favorite. He's Australian.
Oh, wow, Greg, you're turning a new leaf.
Yeah, I wish he was from New Zealand, but he's my favorite like philosopher of science. And so he writes about these studies that are compelling, but extremely controversial. But like he is a philosopher, so he's like, his job is to kind of take science and almost use it to like talk about
construct a worldview.
Yes, and the way he defends his worldview is not like, it doesn't have to be like set in stone. Okay. But essentially, it's that there are brain waves that can be detected, like essentially that come out of your brain every time you think about anything.
Yeah.
And that
it's like any circuit. If like electricity, electrons are moving through a wire, it creates a field. And your brain is literally just like electrons moving through neurons.
And like when you, like we are going to do a video on this because it's like, I want to get it all right and it's so interesting. But like one example is like if you're playing a video game with someone, like that divorce game that we were playing, it's like your brain waves like sync up.
Oh, cool. Like they're firing in a really similar way.
Yeah. And they kind of like, it can make you feel connected to someone like.
And that's why video games are the best thing in the world.
Yeah, but then
even though you stop playing that game.
Also, it's like they put someone in a room and put someone in like another room with a wall in between, and they like show them things, and then they start realizing their brains like sync up. Because physically they are like saying the brainwaves are going through the walls, and it's essentially like telekinesis vibes.
Wow.
Anyways, grain of salt, all of that.
I'm not saying that I am like wholeheartedly buying into that stuff, but I just think there is so much more than we'll understand.
That's the point. Is it's like as the science advances,
It's
like
deeper.
imagine they start realizing like people get together and like essentially like we went bird watching together and we're all doing the same task. Like are our brains syncing up spiritually? Like blah blah blah. Like it's
and
interesting.
is there like an actual physical manifestation that you could measure of that?
Yeah.
And I mean, like I would probably think yes. And that may like I think people can take that idea to the extreme where it's like obviously this effect is in a small enough way that you need to have like really sensitive like measuring tools to be able to do that. But like there is like an interesting philosophical or spiritual argument that this just isn't discovered because it's so it's on such a deep level in the same way that it took us so long to understand what electrons were and like get smaller than an atom. It's like to understand human thought and connectedness is like such a much bigger question of like, can we actually get the tools to be measuring that? But if it is that little, then maybe it's like the impact is not necessarily this huge thing. You're not going to be able to like control somebody's mind.
But it's fun. It's fun to think about. And then also, okay, I think you will help me decide if these are also completely episodes on their own. But the two biggest takeaways from the book, and I encourage people to read it. I think lots of people, it's like a very
I want to
big
read it.
deal. But okay.
It's a big deal, the book, you mean? Like it's a
like
popular book?
every time he releases a book, it's like,
people like are excited or
and it
have
changes
opinions.
people's opinions on science or whatever. But he did this like moral thought experiment. It's all rooted in philosophers that like if you're into philosophy you probably know about like factory farming and the consumption of animals as humans. And he was like, you need to look at if you were to die and come back as something, would you choose to come back as it, or would you rather not exist forever? And so because he's like pigs and chickens are essentially so horribly treated, you come back, you never leave it.
You would never want to be that.
It was like, you would never want to be that. Whereas if you were to come back as like a pig that like grazed and was
got to
hunted,
have like an otherwise normal life.
yes, it's like a more, it was like, it's like a moral question. And it's like, he's like, if you can't fathom coming back as the animal that you are consuming, then you need to consider it morally.
Yeah.
And then his other defense against the climate crisis is like, we have to stop thinking about fossil fuels and economy and all this stuff because it's just like too complicated and he doesn't think it'll work. And you have to focus solely on biodiversity. And so he's like, take Toronto, for example. He's like, instead of trying to be like a carbon tax or whatever, he's like, you need to be thinking about green spaces and defending the biodiversity of an area, and by proxy you will create the solution for the climate crisis. So like, it was just like, I like,
it's an interesting
obviously
perspective.
reading it, there's all these moments where I'm like, okay, easy to write. Like he's clearly a writer and he's like, I got to shut my book and be like, like there's so many other
Still
reasons,
worthwhile
but
to
it's
think
like
about.
cool to have these people who try to have definitive like points. And I want to maybe do a video on that. Like the defense of biodiversity. There was a lot of really interesting points as to like why that is probably easier for someone who like drives a car or like,
it's not necessarily about like destroying or like getting rid of or
totally. It's not about
like obviously like so many people drive and need to drive, and it would be very disruptive to just be like, we need to get rid of cars.
Or even the economy. Like everyone's like, well, what are we going to do without like the tar sands or whatever?
But
it's
then
like,
how do we compensate for by? And I think everyone feels good about like more green space.
Yeah, he said
and
it
knows like every study shows humans who have access to green space are generally happier.
And it's even just about like understanding like what the animals need to thrive and to survive. And like, it's really interesting, and I will make more notes on it for later. But yeah, incredible book, which also inspired.
What's the name of it again? Do you know offhand?
In Living, it's like The Lives of Others or something. It's Peter Godfrey Smith's new book. His other one's Metazoa. That one's so good. They're all really good, but it's just like, I love when people try and have like strong opinions about what to do about the climate crisis and stick with them.
Yeah.
And they're like, they're obviously complicated, but it's not complicated the way he writes about it. And I'm like, that takes confidence.
Kinda nice, yeah, it's nice to like obviously follow someone who believes something.
Yeah. Even if he's
That can go
Australian. Kidding. Okay. So
I don't. Let's. Any other thoughts about like left brain?
no,
right
I want to
brain?
get into what did we learn this week.
Okay. Hopefully that was interesting. I feel like it leads to lots of interesting existential
And we're going to keep
questions.
talking about it for sure.
But we'll take a little break, and then we will come back to talk about, what are we talking about? Cuddling and what was yours?
Listening.
And listening. Okay, we're back.